Okay, here we are. Thank you for tuning in. We've been having a great time so far, and we're going to continue on with the lessons and show you some more cool stuff today. Okay, so if you recall from our last lesson, we talked and reviewed a lot about major chords and minor chords and bar shapes moving up and down the neck. And we showed you how to put those together, and we came up with a cool progression, and I know you've been practicing that hard. However, what we're going to do today now is we're going to use that progression that we've given you, and I know you've been practicing, and we're going to apply some soloing techniques on top of it. Okay, so if you recall with the progression, and you might want to go back and look at it again, it was basically B major, D major, E major, and G major. So we had this kind of a thing. That was the first part of the progression. And then the second part of the progression went to here. E minor, D major, C major, B minor, A minor, G major, and then back to D and E. So basically what we had is a 2-key chord progression. You can see it's right behind me. And that's what we used last lesson. But what are we going to do with that that's going to incorporate some soloing techniques? Well, I'm going to talk about that right now. Let's take a look at the board over here, and you can see what we're going to do is we're going to have 2 different types of scales we're going to use for that progression. Okay, and I've taken the time to write them out for you. And we've already covered these scales before, but I'm going to review them here real quick, and we're going to talk about how we can make these scales musical and interesting. Okay, so the first scale that we've talked about, I introduced this pattern a while ago, but it's a pentatonic scale. Okay, and I wrote it out in the key of B, so it would relate to the progression that we're practicing. Okay, it's a B minor pentatonic scale. Okay, the root is right here, and right here. Okay, and it's B minor because it has a minor third in this scale, and we've already talked about what that means, but it's basically a minor third, a fourth, a fifth, and a flat 7. So it has a minor sound. So it works really great over a lot of chords. In fact, even though we're playing it over a major chord at the beginning, it still just sounds great. It's one of the interesting things about rock and blues is you can play scales with minor notes over major chords, and they sound great. It's just the essence of rock and roll and blues, okay? So we're going to play this scale on the part of the progression where it goes. Does that 4 times. We're going to use this scale, just this one position. Okay? Now, what happens when we go to here? The next section. Okay, well, that's where we utilize the second scale, the pattern 1 G major scale. Okay, because that's where the progression changes key. Okay? So we can't keep playing that B minor pentatonic scale really very successfully. We're going to have some problems. So some of the notes would sound all right, but I really want you to think of the other part of the progression as G major. It's also, you could also even describe it as E minor, but we're going to talk about how those 2 sounds are the same. E minor and G major are actually the same key, but let's just call it G major today. And we're going to use a 7-note scale, a full major scale. I'll refer to the chord form that it fits nicely over, just so you're reminded of that. This is a G major pattern, and it fits perfectly over the G major chord form. Okay, so it really helps keep that all straight for you. So let's take that pattern and play that together. 3, 4. Works out really great for the G major part of the progression where we're doing all this. And then we go back to the pentatonic sound after that. Okay? Now, I'm going to show you a few things when I play about these 2 scales that'll make it sound musical. And one of the first things I want to talk about is the idea of, especially in the pentatonic scale, the idea of string bending. Okay? Now, you've probably seen me already utilize string bending, and I'm sure for a lot of people at home, you probably do some string bending and don't think that much about it, but there's a lot of important elements to string bending that I want you to get in the habit of thinking about and paying attention for when you're practicing, okay? And basically, bending just adds a lot more vocal quality to the notes when you play them on the guitar. That's what's so great about the guitars. There's a lot of different techniques that you can use to make the notes sound different or to sound unique, right? It really helps to utilize as many techniques as you can because it just makes your playing more expressive, okay? So one of the first things you can do on a guitar that's cool is to take a note and just simply play the note a pitch, either a whole step or a half step up, and bend into that pitch instead of going or, right? It's perfectly acceptable, right, to bend it. It adds a certain nice musical and bluesy, just a vocal quality to it, right? So all I'm doing is taking a note in the pentatonic scale and bending to the next note that it would be anyway. I'm just taking that note and bending it up to the tonic. I'm taking the A and bending it up to the tonic. Now I want you to pay attention to something. Look at the position of my left hand, okay? Notice that I'm not doing this. I'm not playing with my thumb behind the neck like I'm playing chords, right? I'm not doing that because I don't really have the control of the bend and the leverage that I need when I'm bending, when my thumb is that far back. That's no good. The reason I have it here is because I have more of a connection with the neck, and therefore I have more strength in my hand and more control over how the bend sounds, right? I can apply vibrato if I'd like, right? I just feel like I have more strength that way, okay? So pretty much when I'm bending, my hand and my thumb is generally almost over the edge of the low E string. Not always, but most of the time it's kind of situated like that because I just feel like I have more power that way, okay? So let's go over some of the other places we can bend in the scale, okay? We've learned that the flat 7 of the scale is nice up to the root in this particular position. How about this note here, the 4th degree up to the 5th degree, right? I'm basically playing that note right there, but I'm bending into it, right? And that's really important, what I said right there. I'm playing the note, and I'm also bending into it to check it and see if I'm in the right pitch. You see how important that is? I really want that to be the same exact note. I don't want it to say, okay, well, that's the note I'm going for, and then I play this. That's no good. See how flat it is? That just sounds wrong. You don't want that. That sounds bad. Right? You want to really make it be up to pitch. Right? So check yourself when you're practicing your bending. Right? And on a Telecaster like I'm playing, the tension of the strings is very stable because there's no springs behind the body like a Stratocaster might have or some other kind of guitar that has a Floyd Rose system. So it's easier to play in tune on a Telecaster because of the engineering of the bridge. But that doesn't mean that you can't do it on a Stratocaster. You just have to use your ear to develop a better sense of pitch when you bend because you have to compensate always a little bit. Okay, so we've got the 4th up to the 5th, the flat 7 up to the root. How about the minor 3rd up to the 4th? Right, that's kind of nice too, right? That's utilizing your 4th finger now. I'm always pushing a little bit with the fingers below as well. Right, I'm not just going like this. Can't even do it actually. So my fingers are basically pushing from below. So that, generally speaking, you tend to bend the top 3 strings more than you bend the bottom strings. I mean, it's just harder to bend the thicker strings, and you tend to have to push them out of the way, and if you're bending the bottom strings up, it's harder to push them into other thick strings, other wound strings. So the 3rd second, and first tend to work the best. I mean, you could bend the root here if you wanted to, even up to a note that's not in the pentatonic but in the scale. That would be like C sharp, but I do that sometimes, not as much. And sometimes when you're bending on low strings, you might just bend. You might actually bend down rather than push up like the other strings, so you do. Right? But anyway, tend to focus on, in this position, on the notes that are available to bend with the third and the fourth. In other positions, you'd have different bends that are available to bend with different fingers, right? If you were playing, let's say, pentatonic, right here, right, you'd have other bends that are available, maybe that note right there, the fourth degree, or rather the fifth degree, could be bent up to this note in the pentatonic scale, but you'd have to use a minor third bend. It'd have to be a step and a half, right? So that's a tougher bend because it's you have to bend higher and you have to have stronger hands to do that one. But anyway, we'll talk about that position another day. But let's keep going on. Right. So when you put bends together with other things, right? It's a typical blues bend. Right? Right? See how much more expressive I'm getting now? Because I'm able to create a vocal sound with my bends. Now that's cool because I'm bending up and I'm playing another note on top. And I let them ring together. Right? That's kind of a nice sound. How about if I take this and bend this up? And I keep this note down. Right? So I really am employing a lot of hand strength to make these bends happen. Right? But you can start off with just simple bends like I first demonstrated. How about even a first finger bend? This is a little more difficult. I'm taking the first finger and I'm bending up the minor third up to the fourth. All right? Okay, so all that's available in this basic pentatonic shape. It's amazing how much music is available when you start really exposing where the bends are and putting them together over the other things you've been practicing. It just starts to come to life here. So we're going to use that over the progression here in a minute. Now, over the second part of the progression, where we go to G major, we've got a major scale right underneath our fingers. Now, we're going to use that. I'm going to focus on just making the shift from the B bluesy sound of the pentatonic scale to playing the major scale. We're not going to talk as much about bending in this scale, even though there's plenty of places to do it. I just want to get you to kind of think in two different ways, bluesy and bendy in the first part of the progression, and use the major scale in the second part of the progression to make just a different kind of a contrasting sound in your soloing. So maybe you could play a little bit more of the scale sounds. Right? And you'll hear how that will blend together. So let's go back to our progression now, and I'm gonna actually turn on my rap pedal here and get a little rock and roll on you. So listen to this, and that'll make it a little bit more soulful. Hey, and noisy too. Listen to that. Okay, so all those bends now, listen to how they sound. So you can get into some combinations when you bend on the top and then you come down with some of the scale. Turn down a little bit. I'm killing you at home, I can tell. Right? It's just a really nice. There's a double stop bend. That's cool too. I'm holding this note and I'm bending this note up. Okay, so listen to how great that sounds now over the progression. Okay, here we go. 3, 4. I'm going to use the scale. Back to blues. Okay, so there you have it. A lot of expression now we're able to achieve simply by using some of the bends in the pentatonic and a little bit of distortion, a little bit of attitude, and we're creating a lot more of a rock sound out of our pentatonic, and it's really coming to life now. So I hope you're exploring that at home. And the major scale that I use, you can hear was a contrast. It overlapped a little bit, but I tried not to blues it out as much as I tried to play more melodically. Okay, just so I'd have a contrasting kind of soloing sound between the two sections. Okay, so I'm going to give you one more final thing in pentatonic, just so you can maybe practice this for a little technical thing at home. Okay, so let's do this. This is going to be another sequence. Okay, so let's review our pentatonic one more time. Sorry. Okay, I think what adds excitement to a solo sometimes is having, I don't know, technical things that sound flashy that are kind of fun to play, but they're just kind of, they just have a lot of technique in them, and they sound kind of impressive, but they actually just have a lot of rhythm too, so they kind of make a little bit more of an impression. So one of the things that you might try to play, this is something like and that's called a sequence, right? We've talked about sequences in other lessons, and this is a group of 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm going up 3 notes of the pentatonic scale. Right? And there's a lot of different ways you can incorporate rhythm into that. You can play, right, or right, and make it feel like triplets. You can play, right, But it's basically a sequence, and it's just a matter of the rhythmic combination that you want to make the lick work in. Okay, so listen to how I would play it against this sequence again. Okay. Right? So isn't that cool how it climbs up the pattern, and there's a certain logic to it, and it has a certain musical payoff when you get to the top, when you can kind of, right? And if you get faster, let me see if I can do it here faster. Okay, so you can see that I employed a little bit more technique and kind of used a little variation of it, but the point is it's a sequence and it gives a lot more excitement to some of your phrasing. So let me make sure you can figure that one out at home. Once again, here we go. And I think I just bent that at the end. Okay, so once again, it's basically walking up the scale. 3 notes at a time. Okay, so I think that'll cover it for today. I think you've got a lot to think about with our progression and our soloing techniques now, techniques over the progression, primarily involving bends, okay, and now a new sequence. So why don't you have fun with that this lesson, and I'll see you next week and practice hard. All right, see you soon.